Welcome to Brick by Brick. Join me, Loren, as I share my personal journey of building a thriving real estate and hard money lending business from the ground up. Along the way, we'll explore the strategies, challenges, and breakthroughs that come with growing wealth. Whether you're a seasoned investor or aspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the world of private lending and real estate, this podcast is packed with actionable insights, real-world stories, and mindset tips to help you build your own path to success brick by brick. Welcome to another episode of Brick by Brick. Today I have a great host with me, Neil Twa. So Neil started his career with IBM and has since moved on to the Amazon FBA space. He's wrote a couple books, he's got a podcast, and he is in an entirely different space than what normally my guests are, and that he is working in the Amazon FBA space. And really an interesting conversation we're going to have about how to fundamentally set up your business, how to manage the people within your business. And I think you're going to offer a lot to our audience. So Neil, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate this time to chat with you and get to know your audience a little better as we talk about, these things, whatever we talk about. And I love how you held the A just a little bit on the end. I heard that on purpose with the last name. I was joking with before we got in the agreement for those who are listening. Everybody always butchers my last name, TWA, and they usually remember it before they remember my name. They'll be, oh yeah, you're that Twa guy. Some sort of designation, some sort of acronym, but it isn't. It's just 3 letters. So yeah, dude, I appreciate being here.
It might be speaking of being in North Carolina now for 8 years, the Southern is starting to rub off on me.
The Southern. Yeah, dude, it has a bit of those long New English tonalities. We'll be there. Actually, we'll be in South Carolina next week down there in Myrtle Beach hanging out with the family. So we'll be in your neck of the woods. I spent some time up in New York, and if you get up obviously higher up there, you either talk faster or you have a certain kind of twang and an accent. And out here in the Midwest, I'll end up throwing off a lot of Midwesternisms. So forgive me for that from the beginning here. But since we live on the country in about 50 acres now, we have been acclimated to country life. Absolutely love it. But there's a lot of fun sayings and a whole different speaking and tonality and twang that comes with living in the country.
I might not even notice though, since I was born and raised in central Michigan. So
yeah.
Some of that stuff will just float right over my head as totally normal.
You're just Southern Canadian, right? Isn't that how they joke? Southern Canadianers with your A's and your twang. Yeah, dude. I actually, family up from Minnesota up there. My dad's from the Mankato area up north. And Twa came through French Quebec, Canada. My great-great-grandfather was a fur trading guy from the Hudson Bay company and came out of that and down into America, and then concatenized his name from Le Twa down to TWA. And I ended up growing. I was born here in Missouri, but we moved to Oregon when I was a kid. So when I was about 3 or 4, we landed in Oregon. So that's where I grew up, was on the West Coast, and always wanted to be a fighter pilot. That was my whole thing. I literally, how people are like, you grow up wanting to be these things and playing, the NASA science and guys in the backyard, and you want to be the fighter pilots and go to war or whatever, as we are boys. And then eventually people grow past that and they're like, well, we grew up and we got a job and we went to college. I was like, no, I was through high school. I was going to be a fighter pilot. And we got down, my dad was a Vietnam vet. He was on a destroyer and spent 2 tours in the Navy. And I wanted to go into the Air Force and be a fighter pilot. So, and the semester before, you get out of school in your senior year and they're all like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're taking tests and you're trying to figure out and you're doing all this stuff for college and applications. And I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. So I went down to the office and I got to do the first test of the 16E cockpit, and wouldn't you know it, I'm too tall. I have too much height from my waist up, and with the helmet on, they couldn't close the canopy, and they're like, sorry, man, you're not going to be able to fly these. I'm like, seriously? That was this was the whole thing, right? I waited this whole time to do that. So my fallback plan was to go to college, in which basically the internet came on while I was in college, kind of saved me. And in my 3rd year of basically a few months of computer science programming, when I thought that was the way to learn what was happening with the internet, I discovered that's not going to make it. So I jumped out and literally went and got a job to go where the money was going, because I saw the internet and I saw what was changing so dramatically. And I was like, I want to be a part of that, but you couldn't be taught anywhere. Like there was nobody, that people were just figuring it out as they go along. Like, what's this new thing and what do we do with it? And obviously by 99, a lot of people figured out what to do with it and not to do with it as the dot-com bubble completely burst. But as the technology changed in 2000, 2001, 2002, and the whole systems really came online with the internet, I got in part of a mobile company called Sprint. You may have heard of them. And they had this little mobile division. They're like, hey, we're launching mobile phones and come join us. And so I did. I got a full-time gig helping them launch mobile phones, running the infrastructure. There's 50,000 web pages that my team managed to help the customer support and calls and flow. And then that became systems and technology of AI and knowledge management and learning systems, LMS systems, which eventually led me into IBM, where we were building latent semantic search engines. We were building the framework of today's AI platforms. We were working on the knowledge learning that led to programming the machines that we were spending time on the Watson Super Blue computer, building models, which became the large language models of today. And that was 20 years ago, and I didn't realize what we were doing in building these frameworks, and got to be a part of that, which was super cool. But always wanted to do my own thing. Long story short, and in 2007, when the opportunity came, I had lost my mentor 2 years prior, who was my uncle. He was kind of like my rich dad, who taught me all about the ideas of business and growth, and kept pushing me, get out of the corporate world, find your own thing, do your own thing, get a franchise, do something. Like, don't just stay in corporate. You're never gonna make the opportunities. You got to get out. But he unfortunately died in an aircraft accident, and that 2 years later was part of my motivation, as I kind of got my mind around it and realized that I needed to get something done. It was about the same time IBM said, "Hey, we're archiving your job. Do you want to go to Argentina or start over?" And I'm like, no, I'll take early retirement, thanks. So I jumped out and started a series of companies over the last 18 years, everything from high tech and oil and gas to consulting to lead generation and mobile marketing, and into the physical products world around 2012, where we discovered physical products as basically not only a hedge against inflation. You take fiat currency, you turn it into inventory and capitalization, which I know my real estate folks understand, and you obviously sell that for a higher value, and you repeat the process. And when we learned about branding of physical products, that really changed the game and got us to our first seven-figure business in 2015 in one of our brands. And from there, it was all about systemizing that process. Once you get to 1 million, it's mostly just scramble and revenues. And by the time you get to looking at, well, what does it take to go from 1 million to 5 million? It's all about repetition, systems, and processes internally. And so we started to do that and allow replication of businesses because of that. So we started launching more and more brands, and it went fast. It has gone so quickly in the last 12 years. I can't even tell you how fast. We now have control of like 24 brands. We're acquiring new ones. We're starting up additional ones. We are in the different stage of the evolution of the business now. We roll out a software to support. It's something we've been using internally. We're now rolling that out to the mass market. Our MVP should be coming up shortly. And then we're just focused on building the businesses and acquiring great ones. We have a closing this month on about an $8 million acquisition. We are closing on a $250,000 acquisition in one of our partnerships right now. And we are looking to acquire like 3 to 4 more of those companies between 10 and 20 million as we build up that portfolio with a private equity group that is a mission-based, veteran-supported, veteran-backed, veteran-funded group called Patriot Growth Capital. They helped about 16,000 veterans last year in support of their families and education and moving off the line and anything else necessary to support them for the up. And so as we build these companies or buy these companies, we're going to be employing veterans in those companies, those that get to be 10,000 hours of proficient, have a CEO mindset to them, and want to potentially buy the business after 5 years. We have a little war chest we're building up to give that person an opportunity to acquire that company after 5 years from us. So we have a kind of a business as a mission. So long story short, to get to where I am today, which is building and buying brands.
Very nice, very nice. Let's take a step back to when you were leaving your corporate job and
Yes.
moving in. So talk to me about like what your mindset was around that jump, leaving basically a secure corporate job, moving into, starting your own business, which I went through, a year or two ago, and it's a bit scary, right?
Sure.
At least was
Absolutely.
for me, but it's very exciting. So talk to me
Right.
about that. And then also how you decided what your first venture was going to be.
So I've never been terribly risk adverse. And so for me, the idea, of jumping out of college wasn't super scary because I saw the momentum. And I told a friend the other day who had a son, I said, if he's in these kinds of degrees now in college, I would probably recommend he just jump out of college and go start learning AI systems, business, and doing something that's appropriate to the time right now, similar to the way the internet came online. Because if you're in the college right now, you're basically going to be months, 6 months behind, 3 months behind. That's just going to keep stacking up every 6 to 12 months. And at the rate at which we're now moving into whatever this becomes, Internet 9.0 or whatever we're headed for with AI systems, it's an evolution. It's the beginning of the internet now. And so as I looked back at those changes, I, honestly, because I saw the internet and saw its opportunity and kind of rode where the money went, because money's like a river and it moves. And at this point, it wasn't moving into academia yet to get the systems, marketing, people, and technology in place. It was rolling into the startups, entrepreneurials. It was rolling into the market. And that's where I wanted to go. So I followed the money into the corporate world, never wanting to be there. So I know some people may be there for 10 to 20 years and they thought that's maybe how they're going to get to their retirement. That's how they're going to see their, end goals. I just used it as a tool. That's where I went to follow the money. And so I never wanted to be there. So I was always looking for an opportunity to get out. I always had a little side hustle thing going on. I had a game server company running in the early 2000s with like 20,000 users playing my games in servers in Texas. So I always wanted to do something and just didn't have the momentum. And part of that kickstart was my uncle dying. And in the 2 years after, I just kept going, there's got to be something. I'm waiting and waiting. And then I realized there's just not going to be a right time. So I had made my choice that when I was getting married to my wife, who I've been married to for 18 years now and together for 20, we were getting married in March of that year, that 2007. And so the catalyst for change was already there. And I kind of decided that no matter what, I was going to jump out, like just timing. Like we're already sort of getting going, and let's be semi-poor working dinks together. And let's just see where this goes. We didn't have kids yet. Well, that changed extremely fast. So my mindset was really like, let's just figure this out. Let's get it done. And my wife was just like, you do what you need to do. And this is fun. Let's go see what happens. And she was definitely in my court. She was a good friend and of course a great spouse and has been, but she just like, hey, do whatever, we'll be fine. And it's super encouragement, helped my mindset by not having to feel like I had to battle the world, battle my own problems, battle my insecurities, battle the change and the risk and the change and the potential, fears I had about what would happen. But I didn't have to battle my wife either. So that was a big win, right? Because she was just like, go do it. We'll be fine. Well, she was working. She had an RN and BSN degree. She was out and making some money. And we found out that after, I decided to leave and IBM was like, hey, take your early retirement. That was June. So we got married in March. That happened in June. By October, we were pregnant with our first child. So now the game changes again, right? And, mindset of change is something that I'm basically alluding to here as part of the answer. Change is something that if you are not comfortable with change, if you simply won't disrupt things to make change happen, so progress will occur, stagnation will occur, things will set in, you'll start grappling when things changed for the worse and you don't know what's happening, the fear will kick in, you'll try to start holding on to things instead of letting them go. You'll actually fall into a scarcity mindset, even though you think, well, I'm working for myself now, I'm in my own company, there's abundance everywhere. You'll actually start pulling in and creating scarcity. And it's like blood in the water to sharks, especially if you're trying to make sales and business. People will hear it. If you're in B2B, if you're trying to do real estate, if you're trying to make businesses happen, they will smell that blood. They'll smell that desperation on you, right? Because you don't have that confidence. It's extremely hard to get into that place and to work your way out of that. So you have confidence enough to be able to, articulate and sell and do the business you need to do it. And so I was just a matter of change just became my life. I had a lot of changes leading up to my time when I got married to my wife when I was 29, I think 30, somewhere in there. And so there's a lot of change that just kept happening. So change for me just became a normal process of acceptance that nothing would progress without change. So I had reached the other side of that, not the fear of the change, that things had to change or nothing would progress. And I think that you can see that in a lot of entrepreneurs or a lot of business people. They're afraid of the change. Does that make sense? And so without that change comes no idea that there's some risk for the reward. The reward will just keep being there. And if something changes, it's not my fault. So we want to distance ourselves. We want to say it's not our fault. Like, well, it might be my business. Well, this happened. This vendor shut down, or, oh, that contract went down, or, oh, no, the geopolitical crap's happening again, and something over here is affecting me. Like, you will constantly be in a knee-jerk reaction to everything that is happening while you try to control the change. And I'm on the other side of that fence. Like, change must happen for progress to happen. And I think if a lot of people can understand that, be willing to assess the correct risk and reward, then they will see they're not going to gain the better opportunity, the less time here, the more money there. They'll have certain components that have to be changed in order to make that really happen. And so, yeah, I just got into the idea that was okay. And when it happened and happened enough change, I'm like, okay, we're just rolling with this now. Like, let's just see what happens. I'm married now. I'm out of a job. My wife's out of a job. She's pregnant. Well, she ended up being out because she became high risk in December of the same year and ended up going on bed rest. So I had to go on the medical leave. And then eventually by the next year, as that baby showed up, she's like, I can't go back to work. I'm not letting go of this baby. And I'm like, there's no way I'm letting go of this baby. Like, we just got this whole thing done. She just showed up. Like, there's no way I'm like leaving this kid. So from that point on, it was like, she just, stay home, take care of the kids. I'll figure this out. This will be the way we do it. We ended up having 4 girls in less than 5 years. And so we had a lot of change. And it's been a decade of fast change. Their oldest is now 17, youngest is 12. I have a 13 and a 15-year-old in there too. And life is nothing but a series of changes. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I think I love all that. And so I also have 4 kids. We're on the younger side, right? But
Yeah.
10, 8, 5, and 2.
Well, yeah. So you're not
But
sleeping all the time.
yeah, no, we sleep. We're finally a point where we're starting to sleep,
Right.
In like 5 to 6 hour increments versus 2 to 3. But what I love about what you're saying is the change piece, because I firmly believe that. And I think the reason that most people don't like change is because change is associated with discomfort, and people think that discomfort is a negative thing. But discomfort is one of the best things you could absolutely have, because discomfort makes you change to have a better life. Discomfort pushes you outside of your boundaries and makes you grow.
Challenges.
And challenges. And discomfort is what helps you figure out where you actually want to be. Because if you're always comfortable, you will just stay in that same rut your entire
100%.
life, and you'll get to your 80 years and you look back at your life and think, I didn't want to make any of those decisions, but I felt comfortable, and so I didn't do the things that I wanted to.
So business is just a series of solving problems. And on the other hand, you should create problems in your business that create challenges, so there's opportunity for growth. So you have to be willing to accept that. So the end result of how I ended up to where I was, which was part of your question, was I changed from consulting into lead generation and online marketing as an adaptation of the change in my consulting career, and how I wanted to evolve that beyond just me trading time for money, and putting more people in place to put them to work so that I could focus on the business selling, because sales fixes everything. There was a mentor that taught me later on. It's like, you're just not selling. You're afraid to sell. You need to get out there and be afraid to sell. Sell forward, but sell with integrity, sell with ethics, sell what you know. And if you don't know something, then figure out how to get it done, figure out how to know how to do it, have success in doing it, so that you could sell somebody else on doing it if that's what you choose to do. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course. That's like, this life-changing, simple things. And as I got through that, eventually I had 10 employees working for me, 10 contractors that were subcontracting on projects that I used to go on, were now out there doing that. So I was free to do more of the marketing. Well, I found out I was really good at it. I found out I was better at the media buying and marketing than I was at managing consultants. And so as I started to make more money in that process, I was like, well, I don't really need the consultants anymore. So as the projects rolled off, I rolled the consultants out until I was the only one doing the marketing. And for about 2 years, I was doing mobile lead generation marketing before there was systems to do it on, like spreadsheets, uploads, and find out if the media buy did well, and then do that again. And then the simple systems of media buying came online, which were very basic in 2008, 9, 10 or so. And by 2010 to 2012, they advanced extremely fast into more systems of online media and marketing, making it a little easier to launch campaigns and test that out. So it got a little faster and easier. But I ran into a need to change. Why? Because I knew that I was still trading time for money when I'm the only one running the campaigns. So it's the same thing. I know I need to keep changing. And I realized, well, there's the offers that I'm running over here that were making the money, the affiliate, the sponsorships, this kind of stuff, for the mobile ad installs and dating apps and all the different things I was promoting at that point, was that I didn't control the outcome. I didn't control the end of the offer. And that's when I really sort of pivoted out of the entrepreneurial mindset and into a business mindset. How do you create opportunity to control the business as much as you can? And that's where physical products came in, as I transitioned out of just pure digital marketing for that sake and into a physical product tied to the digital. And that's what eventually led me to Amazon. As they were rolling out their systems, they were moving more physical products than just books. They had a mantra to build a system when we're deploying billions of dollars of infrastructure to move every kind of product to every person in 30 seconds, from a 30 seconds or less buy to a 2-day or less ship time. They had created problems that they were in the process of solving. And I saw that as an opportunity. And I saw the technology that was advancing that, a learning system that they were deploying in their online marketplace that was literally like the one we were deploying back in the IBM days. So I knew how it was building. I knew how it was learning. I knew how it was being programmed to respond. And so I started to work up a testing mechanism to test products in a flipping to see how it would respond from sales and marketing and rankability. And wouldn't you know it, it was doing a lot of the things I expected it to do. And if I told it to do something or I trained it to do something, it would respond in a certain way. And so I built a launch process. And in our physical product launch process, in 6 to 12 weeks, we were ranking products extremely fast inside of Amazon. And that's when I was like, well, how do we repeat that even greater? And that's when brands kicked in. There was a problem to solve, there was a challenge to change. And it was like, well, we need to get into branding. Well, what does that mean? I've never really branded physical products. So now we have to learn what it means to become a brander of physical products, not just a seller and a marketer, and just evolved through that change. So that's how I ended up with physical products. Amazon's Fulfilled by Amazon system, which was in essence a third-party logistics company they bought and they rebranded it. It's actually a separate company. And that company delivers all the products like you guys order for your kids, I'm sure, all the time. And the wife has something coming in every week on Subscribe and Save for kids. And we used to have the diapers. It was a big deal for us. We sat down one night and did two things. One, we canceled our Subscribe and Save for diapers. That was a big win for us, right? You'll get there soon. You'll understand what I mean. Mm-hmm. And then we had the audacity to go add up how much we spent in diapers. And when it went past $75,000, we were like, that's it. We stopped counting. But we have spent a lot of money on that. But that whole system, it grew. And I fell kind of more in love with the physical products and the online system. Last 5 years have changed extremely dramatic. The level of growth, the systems, the hyper growth situation that occurred from 2020 forward, even what's changing with the tariffs, is creating a huge market opportunity, a gap that in this particular space online that I haven't seen since 2013. So I'm like a kid in the candy store right now, running around, deploying capital and brands as fast as I can for the next 12 months to capture this window. This is like Internet 2.0, like the 3.0, 10.0. I don't know where we're at. Internet AI of all things is shifting so fast, so immensely that I don't know that we're at the ground level, so I see it from the ground level. But if you can understand at the top end about products and movement and tariffs and stuff that are changing the way we do business, there's always money moving everywhere, and money is moving right now in a very different way.
So let's put a pin in that market opportunity, because I want to come back to that. I think that you kind of glossed over a concept that a lot of new business people don't understand.
Okay.
And that you started out on something and eventually ended somewhere else that you never thought you were going to be. And too often, entrepreneurs or people leaving their W-2, they think that they need to have the exact product, the exact company, all the things figured out before they get started, not knowing that as soon as they do that, they're setting themselves up to fail, because everything's going to go to hell as soon as they get started, and they're going to have
setting up we call that hopium. So they've bought into the hopium idea that there's a certain time frame, a 3 to 5 minutes, $1 million success, or a 3 to 5 month. Somebody comes on and be like, "Hey, I got $1 million brand on Amazon." Great. And they'll be like, "Well, how did you do it?" And here's how I did it. And they make it sound like it just happened in the last 3 to 5 months when it probably took them 5 years. And the saleability of that sounds great. It tickles the ear. It makes everybody understand. But in practicality, if you are building something in 3 to 5 years that can sustain you, that becomes a measure of business and growth, a profitability, and an upside potential, then you will live like nobody else will live after 5 years, right? That's the E-myth, and it's 100% true. You just have to spend what time in 3 to 5 years, time, attention, energy, attention, and money that others are not willing to spend in order to be successful. My first 5 years sucked, okay? They sucked because I was still trying to figure out what I was becoming. And what partially saved that was I went back to a consulting gig 2 years into my first 2 years attempt at this. I took a consulting gig back with IBM because they called and said, "Hey, that projects and the 2 projects you were working on, they're like falling apart. And we're wondering if you can come back and help us." I'm like, "Well, I'm no longer W-2 material, man." He's like, "That's okay. We don't need you. We just need you a contract." And I'm like, "Great. So here's my big old fat per an hour fee. And here's my per diem. And that's the only reason I'll come back." And he's like, "Done. When can you be here?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I made some money in that time frame to basically sustain the time and the money and push out what was required to get me to the next step. And I think a lot of people don't see that in its perseverance, in its tenacity. We sold a home that we had built prior to that so we could extend. We sold the cars to the debt, and we took what capital we had and we said, "How much farther can I push this out?" Not how much do I have to spend, because that's where a lot of people are going with what you just said. How much do I have to spend to make this work? No, you're asking the wrong questions. You're coming at it from the wrong mindset. It isn't how much money I have to spend. It's not even how much time it takes. It is, am I willing to achieve that goal when it happens, no matter what?
Am I willing to be uncomfortable enough Going back to that, right?
Well, that's
You're
certainly
trying to.
part of it, right? There's a thought process here that the discomfort does not make measure, but the truth is you have to refine gold and silver, and at least specifically gold, in a hot smelt in order to make it pure. You
Mhm.
have to be refined. There is no guarantee. If anybody works with me, I tell them there's not a guarantee. This is a business. It is a process. It has failed points. If you quit any point because you think it is harder, if you build a mountain out of a molehill in your mind, if you set expectations that are unrealistic, you will fail. So don't even start, or you're going to fail with that kind of mindset. Those who understand that it will take whenever time it's going to take, and I will stay in the fight until I figure out exactly what it is, whether it's a product or a service. I might pivot through 10 times until I figure out how to make that one work, and the market wants to buy it from me. Then you keep going, and that's where the win comes from, right? That's why most people can't handle it. They will take, I took a summer, or actually it was a winter break one time, and had a job up in Sioux City, Iowa. Have you ever been in the winter? And well, you're in Michigan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It gets brutally cold. And
Mhm.
there was some wind temperatures like negative 40 at 10 in the morning, and we had to stop working. We spent like 2 hours outside, and then the temperatures got down to like negative 4. And they're like, well, it's time to come in. That's cold, man. I was wiring houses in Iowa, in South Dakota, and it was just brutal. And it was brutal. I'm like, man, people are making, like, you need some struggle in your life to appreciate the kind of business we're talking about, you and I here, that it does not have that kind of struggle in it. It's in
Mhm.
your mind. And if people are listening to this realizing, well, I want this to happen faster, it must happen faster, I need to do these things, man, I'm a guy, I had a family, I pushed a business idea, I push an innovation that was an invention through prototyping and patenting along with a couple of partners so far that I went bankrupt, right? So I have pushed all the way to the end of the things, and I realize where the fear is in that. I realize where the sunk cost fallacy kicks in there, and I realize where there was opportunity. I wouldn't literally be where I am now, innovating products against brands and existing market demand, if I hadn't failed through the market creation process, and in a big way. So I'm willing and have been willing to risk and change things all the way into that point. And I think a lot of people will do anything necessary to avoid that pain,
Mhm.
right? To just placate and say it's okay and it's enough. And I don't have that kind of risk. They want the reward. They would like to be where we are with our brands, but they aren't willing to take that risk. And that is where entrepreneurs who are starting out or even in their walk have to be willing to pivot. You have to be adaptable. You have to learn new things. You have to change your services. You got to change your offers. You got to find your audience and figure out what's worked. But it is not going to happen on the first try. In fact, when I did my first marketing campaigns back in the day when I was telling you about that and launching these I had 299 failures, man. I ended up with like 50 something $1,000 in credit card debt testing things that failed. Like I would make sales, but I couldn't make them profitable, or this thing would work, but it didn't work. And I just kept going with the belief that I was going to hit something. And it took my 300th marketing campaign before I started making $50 a day in profit. And I was like, I'm hooked, man. I knew it was coming. I was just, what happened was I figured out what was working, and I figured out what offer, and I figured out how to structure it. And then it was like a 50, and then it was 500 a day, and then it was $1,000 a day in profit. And it came after the 300th campaign and a lot of heartache. You have to be willing to risk something to gain something. And that is where a lot of people should not be in business for themselves until they get that fundamental thing down big time.
100%. And I think then the next step is now you're in this hustle mindset. You've gotten to that phase where you're making money, and now you have to make the transition into I need to scale, but I'm at $1 million.
Yeah,
That's where a lot of
entrepreneurial.
people get. Yeah, people get stuck at that step. Is that you still have to keep learning, but now you have to learn a whole different set of skills and almost like forget a lot of the things that you did do before, and in order to learn this new set and teach people how to do the things that you were doing.
Yeah.
Tell me about that experience for you, or maybe you never had that because of your
Well,
experience
here's what
before.
I learned. I learned not to split hairs in time between things I didn't understand or would require too much knowledge for me to gain, or I'd had to hire
Mm,
someone who I believed had the knowledge to impart that thing in their job, not knowing how to manage their objectives and key results because I didn't know how to do it. So I had to figure out what I didn't know so that I could do the parts of it I could do successfully and then be able to apply someone to that role and say, these are the things you need to do. These are the key results. That's the objective. That's what I'm hiring you to do. I don't need you to do all those other things. I need you to just do this thing. And it took a lot of failing through that process. It took a lot of mismanagement, hiring the wrong people, realizing I'm spending too much time trying to find people to fit a role that if I had just literally gone and tried it, done it, failed it, figured it out, and understood the process, I would have had it done so that I could have hired the right person or put the right person in that role. And I learned those mistakes early on. I think a lot of people still do. I think there's trouble in people moving from, say, the million to 5 million because they believe that there's some magic A player out there that's going to go work in their business. A players aren't going to work for you. Your opportunity is to find a B player, even a C player, who's willing to get engaged, follow and repeat what you're doing. So there's a force multiplier there, and then maybe train them into a B player. And that's where you're going to have to put your time, energy, and attention is to training that C player into a B player and that B player into an A player. Well, Neil, if I do that, they're going to leave the company. All right, so what? The end result is, look at that as a reward. You train somebody up who's became more successful and you say, good for you, go with God. Like, don't hang on to these things that you think you need to hang on to for the wrong reasons. And some of that is intellectual capital, people sometimes. What we need to do is say, I'm building them up. And if they tend to go, well, that's a problem we have to solve. We'll solve it if that time comes. And in going through that process and realizing, the $1 million to $5 million a year jump really gets down to systems and processes. Okay. You understand how to build those to get to 7 figures. What people will do is they will think, okay, now I want to try all of these other things instead of just staying focused on what's working and doubling down on my time and money to make it go faster, staying in that lane, staying right there. And so they will tend to veer off into other things. And when they split their time, energy, and attention, they do the rest of them half as good as they probably should, right? So instead of focusing, they tend to veer off into these verticals. What we did is we just focused. We focused on the products and the brands and a channel that was working and kept working that channel until it produced better and better results. And while others were giving up and trying other things like drop shipping or arbitrage or all this stuff, we're like, no, we don't really want to do that. And here's why, because we learned not to through the mistake of doing it. So we rolled out what ended up being an 8-figure company that lasted 1 year because we rolled out a warehouse with employees and we started moving products in what I'm going to call a crime of opportunity, which most of us in business have those. And sometimes we take them and sometimes we shouldn't. And in that crime of opportunity, while we had built up brands and they were making profit and they were doing really well, we deployed some of that capital into this other initiative to build up this warehouse out of Salt Lake City. It had 12 people. We were rolling 10 trucks a week of product through it that were replens that had to be checked over. We only put the nicest, newest products into Amazon, listed them there, and did kind of an arbitrage thing. And we ran that up to 8 figures. The problem was the people was part of the challenge, right? Managing them, dealing with them. At some point, we had a manager that was being accused of sexual harassment. That's a whole lot of fun, right? Dealing with the trucks, dealing with the whole logistics, dealing with the, location and travel. We ended up making a job for ourselves. And we're like, this is not going to work. And then we had a partner who decided, he wanted to steal some money from the company. And then when we caught him stealing money, he decided to sue us first, and that turned into a whole thing. And when the end of that came down, we're just like, you know what, hands up, just let it walk, like just burn it to the ground, right? And stayed focused on just the brand building. That was a crime of opportunity, didn't sink the business, but certainly set us back a few years and a lot of money, actually, making that stupid mistake. I don't look back on it fondly per se. I see things that are good, but I look back at it as a lesson of not repeating in the future anything that looks or shapes. And it actually transitioned the way we do business. It was a great move in transition to our business because what ended up happening is as I moved forward with the realization that we saw a market change opportunity of acquisitions, aggregators deploying money, capital. People were buying these companies. We were reaching sort of a maturity. I went out and raised some capital to go acquire companies. This was back in 2019. Started the holdings aspects of Voltage for a portfolio company, tapped some of my network on the shoulder. Kevin Harrington was a mentor and got to him, and through his connections and ours, we built up a portfolio. We had 2 home offices willing to deploy around $50 million apiece into this, and we were going to go buy, profitable brands. We had the operations, we had the skills. This is a growth strategy, and we're going to stay focused on private label brands, right? None of that other stuff anymore. Just stay focused, double down. Right? Turns out the market went a whole different direction. The market changed underneath us, and by 2021, when we had raised the capital and were ready to go to Signature, lawyers, and the whole thing, we noticed that the major players in that market were deploying money into brands that they should have never been buying in the first place. They were literally buying up market share just to deploy capital to try to show that they were doing what they had honored to do in their mission statement and the bylaws of the operating agreement, when in actuality, they should have never touched those companies because they didn't know how to operate them. They weren't extremely profitable, and they were buying them at 40% above market share. So they would go into a company that was maybe asking $1 million, and they'd say, oh, we'll give you $1.4 million. And they'll, oh yeah, the owner would be like, oh, I'm in for that. Let's do that, right? And so they were just buying everything up. There was nothing really left that was good. And so I was like, we can't do this. So in November 2021, we shut it all down because we weren't going to start buying companies. Well, 2 years later, the market changed. Aggregators are now finding themselves going bankrupt, consolidating. I think the last one was running into some major problems earlier. It just bombed, totally fell out of the market. But thank God we weren't involved in any of that, because that was an opportunity. So now we're involved in it because we have a mission, we have a purpose, we're doing it for a very different reason, and we're not going after just any product or business. We're going after the best of the best that we can find. It took us almost 500 companies to find the one we're closing in August on, because we're sifting through everything else. But I think what people need to understand between 1 and 5 is systems and processes, right? You need to understand replication, staying in your lane, and continuing to deploy capital and time and energy into the one lane. It could be one sales channel, one product or brand type. Just stay in that, or one service. Stay in that lane, right? When you get to 5 million to 10 million and you want to expand through acquisition or brand diversification, it is going to be a capital risk problem. And I will tell you that like 9.9 out of 10 times, it always comes down to the operator, never the business. They've reached a point where growth and market share is now becoming a significant component of their organic sales, their growth, and their upside potential as they're taking over more market share for their particular brand. So now it's about doubling down. It's about getting larger credit lines. It's about deploying more inventory and deploying more marketing and continuing to expand that. And many times that becomes a much higher risk to do that. And a lot of operators will feel that's too risky.
Interesting. So I want to transition a little bit here and move into the FBA Amazon space, because we talked about the marketing opportunity here, but I think maybe level set, because a lot of my audience is going to be real estate people. So I'm aware, but can you give an overview of how the Amazon model works, the difference between FBA versus FBM, and then private label versus arbitrage versus dropship?
Okay, so the FBA acronym, fulfilled by Amazon, is what that means. You would understand it if you order anything from Amazon and it shows up at 2 days or less in your home. It's a last mile delivery system of plane, trains, and automobiles and warehouses that move product to you. We can leverage that, right? So I don't have to go build that. I don't warehouse anymore. I don't have employees that warehouse. If we do, we're going to consolidate it down through acquisitions and stuff, but really try to minimize any business that has that component, simply because we don't need it for economies of scale, right? So when we grow a brand or product, I don't have to hire more people or get more warehouses to make it grow. It's a very different economies of scale in e-com when I use their infrastructure. I leverage it, right? I leverage their customer base and their infrastructure and their warehouses, so I don't have to be, shipping it out every day, right? We deal with a product to a degree, and we have a 1,800 square foot storage location for product in motion. As we deal with product that's selling in Amazon, product on the water, product that's in returned, or product that's at manufacturing, we have to sort of move that. But what it allows us to do, and kind of what I talked about in my book, was it create a bit of almost automated income through not having to build all that infrastructure. So on the world of Amazon's platform, as a third-party seller, which, by the way, Amazon's own statistics tells us that there's 60% of all the sales on Amazon.com come from third-party sellers, which is products you get, daily, weekly, monthly for the last 90 days. You may not realize it, but 60% of those products come from people like us. And that system allows people to start up an account and start listing products in brands. You can do it in arbitrage, like we talked about earlier. You can do it in wholesale. You can do it in the buying and selling of other people's products, or you can build your own brand, your own trademark, your LLC. You can build the intellectual property of a brand, and you can sell it through a channel like Amazon by getting access to their 200 million customers. It's a system that literally moves 6,000, 7,000 units a minute on average. It'll peak between 9 to 10,000 units a minute during the holiday periods like Prime and fourth quarter. So there's an enormous amount of traffic and visibility. 5.2 billion impressions a month are flowing through there. And people go there to buy. That's why they go there. They're not clicking on cat memes on Facebook and, looking at family pictures and stuff and then saying, oh, maybe that's an interesting product. They go to Amazon to reinforce a buying decision that was already meant to happen. They're just determining which particular one makes sense to them, price-wise, review wise, feature wise, function wise, outcome. But they're not actually buying the product, are they? Because the product doesn't show up for 2 days. So what do they actually buy? They bought the intent of the product. They bought the outcome, right? They're expecting to open it up and have it do whatever they want. It could be diapers for the kids. Could be a blender that they want to blend something for an upcoming party. It could be all kinds of things. It could be they want to run faster, jump higher, lose weight, gain weight, get stronger, whatever. All of that is meant for an outcome. So what are they actually buying? Right? They're buying on a customer need or a customer intent. And with the new systems of AI, et cetera, with Amazon having that skill set to go through with zettabytes of information. What's above a zettabyte? I forget now. Some large amount of data, huge amounts of data, right? About all of our buying decisions and what we spend and where we look and how we decide on what to buy and where we click through. And they have this huge massed amount of information constantly changing and evolving. And they're extremely good at putting somebody just in front of a product in 30 seconds or less and having them go, oh, that's the one I want. So I don't have to do any of that. So there's a whole automated sales machine that's at work there. What I need to do is become a direct marketer of products. I need to learn how to connect the product's outcome to a customer who's wanting to buy it in 30 seconds or less, and then have them look at the product and go, that's the one I wanted. They typically have 3 questions. And so the 3 questions we would answer in the listings, graphic, copy, etc., the web page on Amazon, if you will. And when we answer those questions, there's a good chance they're going to buy ours instead of somebody else's. And as we do that, we can build a brand leveraging Amazon's brand. So the speed to market is faster. We have a lot of data now from Amazon that tells me exactly what those needs are, what the products are moving highest in demand. Our process we developed used to be a 59, slot data point spreadsheet is now a complete SaaS system where it greenlights the product, shows us where they're located, helps us product search and determine exactly where it should be filed in that big engine and which particular product is meeting that current customer need, demand, and most importantly, the profitability of that. We don't launch a product that has got less than $12 in profit. So when you put these systems together, what you can have is a profitable e-commerce system that leverages a really large brand to launch a brand no one's ever heard of, do it relatively fast, do it within a control of our own product and manufacturing and private label, meaning we have the manufactured product created for us. We put it in Amazon's warehouses and we sell it through their infrastructure. And I get access to their customers when we do that. So I can incubate that brand in there, determine how and which and size and shape and color and which particular one they want. And then I can focus that data in on what the customers want from us in that brand. Whether they're willing to spend $50 or $500, there's a range of retail price points. Typically for us, that's somewhere between $90 to $150 on average, and our profits are somewhere between $12 to $150 in profit because we have higher end products that they're selling the $400 to $500. But it's all about that profitability. Amazon loves it because if I'm the most profitable product in my little section in Amazon called a node, the little filing area they stick me in, and I'm more profitable than the guy who has the current market share, and by all other instances, I can show this engine that my product sells better as I sell information to an AI engine and convince it that my product is better, I will overtake the sales and start overtaking the market share of the current competitor who already is meeting that demand. No question, it's being sold. I don't have to guess if somebody's buying it. I can see who's buying it and I can see which brand is there. You with me so far? Mm-hmm. So I'm looking to say, is there a Pepsi to the Coke that's already there? Is there a Target to that Walmart? And a lot of times what you'll find as I greenlight a process now and we go through Amazon's data and I lay over my greenlight analysis and I let the system come back and tell me which greenlight, which product, I can see in the data. Literally, it kind of opens up like the heavens pouring in. And there's this product section where I can see the Coke that's currently meeting that market share. And I can see quickly there's no Pepsi. What you see is a gap between that product seller who's up here taking that current market share in the space and all the, what do we call the CCCP products, the cheap Chinese crappy products that are all setting down here. And in that middle market, there's not a competitor. There's no Pepsi to that Coke, right? There's no Target to that Walmart. And I can slip right into that number 2 position. I can tell it the price, the data, the graphics. I can present this all to the AI engine and say, hey, look, we're a Pepsi. They're a Coke. You should sell us too. You give the customer an option. We're an option. You should consider us. And the engine will respond positively by sending us impressions, clicks, traffic, etc. Really right from the very moment we launch the product And we can see organically how the engine is responding to that before we put any marketing on it. It's just a repeatable process. It's all in the data. We just look for the data where there is not a competitor matching another competitor so we can slip into the number 2 position. And you can make millions of dollars doing that over and over and over again. It's product agnostic, because I know a lot of people are like, well, what do you sell? It's not about what I sell. I sell data to an AI engine. It sells products to a customer. It delivers the products, it handles the products, it does the customer return. It doesn't require me to ship them, and I don't have a warehouse of shipping and products and employees. In fact, I have no employees because the infrastructure does all that for me. So what I did was, starting in 2019, when I was doing the building, I was also training people one-on-one, coaching and mentoring them to build up businesses with us, to repeat the process of what we were doing. And in that way, I built up about a group of 300 people since then. That's about it, 2019, because I don't run a course or whatever. And in that 300 people, I've identified the top 5 people. There's actually like 8 of them. 3 of them are really busy and don't want to do. The other 5 were like, hey, we'll run companies with you. So as we trained them up to become successful in their own companies, they now work on a profit split with us in the other companies and brands that we're building up, and they become the operators under a profit split. So we hedge one side of the equation with money, and we bring in partners on finance, or we finance it ourselves, and they come in and they operate the businesses. So I don't have employees. I've got people who are other businesses and CEOs who are working with us to build up these brands. And that's one of the ways we got out of that whole employee and got into literally just partnerships with our builders.
Interesting. So how do you handle, so you're not the only one that has all this data, right? Obviously Amazon has all this data. And I got to believe that at some point Amazon's looking at some product. Actually, I know this happens. They say, there's actually a lot of money to be made here. We're going to make our own. We'll label it, I don't know, make something up, Amazon Basic. And we're going to sell our own, and totally, and maybe you want $12 a profit. They're going to take $4 a profit, right? Because they operate on margin, real tight margin. How does that play into your business strategy? And how do you handle that when that does happen, if it has happened?
So up until about 8 months ago, Amazon had a number of brands it was controlling. It bought Roomba. It created a bunch of brands. There is a situation in one documented incident that I've seen where Amazon internally copied somebody's brand. They got sued and it became a big issue. Are there bad actors inside of Amazon? Absolutely. I've met them. They get paid under the table to try to hurt your brand when a competitor pays them on the inside to do things. That's not a policy of the corporation. That's bad actors inside the corporation. I'm not a fanboy, but let's keep it real, right? So there are bad actors. We ran into them. Ran into one the other day. Okay, did a DCMA takedown request when he copied our listing to his listing, one for one, and we had screenshots and proof and everything. And then he filed a DCMA takedown request to have us pause while we proved to Amazon that we didn't copy his information. Well, of course, we were able to prove that, and our listings came back online. So he did it again. Right. And so now we're going to sue him. I'm sorry, but that's just a negative aspect. It's tortious interference. So with the effect of that, yes, there are actors and bad actors at play in any business, any situation, anywhere, right? There's predatory lending. There's all kinds of stuff in the real estate. There's a bad GC. There's things that happen, right? So we have to deal with those kinds of things too. Now, Amazon as a whole does not do that. And here's one of the things that really just shifted 8 months ago. When the tariff situation came online, Amazon decided not to replenish a good portion of most all of its private label brands, right? So they literally took them offline. And so they're not even competing in many areas with us anymore. And when we see that, there's just market opportunity that's opened up in many areas. There's the first time in this last 8 months that Amazon has actually seen a 20% decline in new sellers. About 300,000 sellers fell out due to the tariff changes because they either couldn't keep it or were fearful or knee-jerk reaction. And then when it didn't pan out right, they either ordered too much inventory or didn't order enough. And then they're basically falling apart from bad business management. And so those 300,000 sellers have left the market. So far, they're not coming back. They may come back in the next 6 to 12 months, but there's huge open holes now in that market of opportunity where Amazon disappeared and so did a bunch of sellers. Remember I talked about the 2013 thing earlier? Yeah, there's huge opportunity. Now, Amazon has a lot of that data, but I've also got it in my system. So when I pull Amazon's data down and we make that connection through Product Opportunity Explorer and other things, I'm massaging all of that data in my system and it's within my control. And within my control, I'm also pulling in other data and information that we're using to make data-driven decisions based on that. We previously didn't even have any of that data. Amazon only opened that up about 3 years ago. So we have a lot more data now to validate things we had done through pattern and performance, our accounts, our client accounts, and we could really see what was going on and made algorithms to project how that product would respond or which one we should sell. But now I have Amazon's actual data. So with that, I don't need to make those algorithmic guesses anymore. I use that process to say, well, here's the need, here's the product, here's the location, here's the data that basically proves there's a gap. There's a no number two. Let's go launch that. And I have about 1,000 of those products in pipeline right now. Of the 103,000 needs on Amazon, we sorted that down to 10,000. Our operators took it down to about 5. And out of that 5, we refiltered by the top 1,000 products that we want to launch. And we're literally just working through those products as a preference. The need is there, the number 2 position is there, the demand is there, and the profitability is there. So it's just a pipeline we're working through right now. And it creates huge. So there's a bit of myth in what you said, no offense, but just to contradict what that is in terms of myth, there is huge opportunities. If you're going to see something occur, like the DCMA takedown request or a competitor issue, you're going to have another competitor come in the market, maybe me, maybe one of my clients, maybe somebody else, who has more profit, is more savvy in the way they're approaching the brand, is willing to put in more money to meet the market share demand faster through acquisition than the current brand, and they'll basically take over your market share. So that is as a market, free market capitalization, a capitalistic thing that's occurring, that many people are finding that they simply can't hide anymore in the system because the data has gotten better and it's easier to expose where they had an opportunity, but there's no competition. So we bring competition to the market. And of course, they're going to look and say, well, I'm losing traffic and Amazon's doing this. But in actuality, it's just other brands that are outperforming them. Yeah. And it is becoming so data driven that the other brands who've sat in that position probably got a little lazy, aren't making any innovations, aren't changing things to adapt, aren't seeing how Cosmo is so different than the old engine, the A9 engine that's powered it all to this point. And they aren't making the adjustments required. And we're doing that from day one. So we're basically feeding into the AI the information it wants to see to intersect an audience of people who, millions of people who want that product. And then we're simply just showing up. We're just showing up with the better data. And of course, we have to create a great product. But a lot of people here listening to this today might be saying, well, I need a great product. I need to invent something no one's seen. No, it's about innovation. It's about market innovation of existing demand. That's what it's about. And going into Amazon is a demand capture platform, not a demand creation. I'm not there to create demand. I'm not there to Shark Tank invent something. I'm there to move a product in the market where demand already exists. They just don't see a competitive option, so I'm giving them one.
Do you think that the barrier to entry has increased with all this, like people like you that have access to vast amounts of data and play this game, and versus maybe 5 years ago?
Yeah, the complexity's changed, which means the barrier of entry has changed in terms of opportunity, right? What happened about 5 years ago is a lot of people got into the $20 to $30 to $35 price points due to the Jungle Scouts, Helium 10s, other systems and researchers that kept pigeonholing all these people down into the same areas till they started to sell a lot of the same products. And that eventually became a lot of the race to the bottom. And then the Chinese sellers have caught up in the last 6-7 years. And a lot of them have entered the market with manufacturing and stuff and taken over a lot of those price points in the sub $20. We say friends don't let friends sell $20 products on Amazon. It just doesn't work anymore. The numbers aren't there. And you're competing down at that CCCP level. Okay. So yes, you have to elevate. The barrier of entry is a bit higher. You have to get your product up to the $50 to $100 in retail price point. But by the way, that's where the system has gone. Amazon's average order value is $69, not $29. So when you understand that, you know that the mass majority of product moving on Amazon average $69. What does that tell you? Don't launch a $27 product on Amazon. That's where the data says go launch a $50 to $100 product on Amazon. Why? My profitability is higher. The market already is demanding it at those price points. And I'm going to get out of the CCCP crap. I'm going to have to put a product in the market that is good, even great, right? Better with features and functions that meet the demand of the customer market, that offer an alternative, offer a Pepsi to the Coke, and put it in that price point where it might be $99, not $19. So yes, the barrier of entry has changed, but also the amount of movement of products, the logistics, freight, and supply chain has also changed, right? So once upon a time, it's like, well, I have to order 5,000 units of this product. Well, no, actually you don't. I can order 200 to 300 units of a product in a market test where I have 80% confidence in the data, the profitability, the demand, the number 2 is there. And I take that into the market to find out if the 20% meets my expectations once it's selling in the market, a market test. So we'll test 200 to 300 units for revenue, not for profit. The profitability comes when I know that projecting forward based on the sale of that 200 to 300 units, does the data tell me that this is a positive green light go to put 1,000 units into that product? And if it is not, Can I adjust the saleability, not the product? Remember, everybody's still thinking I got to change the product. No, it is the images, copy, graphics, listing, and marketing you have to change. You have to tweak that in and dial it in to that customer demand. You do that, and you could take a product that's converting at 3% to 30% in 30 days. We've done this repeatedly. We just weren't quite dialed in, so we did a little bit of tweak. We watched the system, we did a little more tweaking. Pretty soon that conversion came up. And what looked like a product that wasn't going to sell very well at all of a sudden it's like, we green light that product. We need 1,000 units. It's time to scale that product. Why? Because we dialed in the marketing. Now, as long as the product doesn't come back with a negative experience, it isn't returned, doesn't break in the first 5 minutes, and it's not so bad they're willing to leave a negative review, then we've solved one part of the whole equation. There's two parts, sales and product. Okay. You can do no sales like I did and go bankrupt because you have a super great product that's got a patent that will never see the light of day. Or you can go sell the crap out of the product and then make sure that the product is really good and complete that equation. If you sell really good and something happens bad with the product, you don't give up and say the whole thing is crap. You fix the product because you can sell it, right? So now we know that there's an equation to fix either one of those components, but sales fixes everything first. Once I know I can sell that product, I project out a 12-month up to a 40-foot container, a profitability of that product's minimum profitability requirement to go out to market and acquire those customers. And I'll put 1,000 units in it and I'll let it go to a full product test, which is to take me from revenue into profitability so that I can hit a cash on cash value for 12 months, which in our world is the 4 turnovers of that product in a year, equatable to the market share that's available for it where the current competitor is setting. Now it's just a matter of time and market.
Have the manufacturers reduced their MOQs?
Yes, absolutely.
When I was looking at like 5 years ago, I mean, you couldn't do anything unless you're buying 1,500 units or something.
That's right. It's changed dramatically. I can get 10 units, 1 unit sent. I can get 100 units sent over.
What's driving that?
Well, the need for business. Right? With the changes in tariffs and the structure of the manufacturers in the last 2 years to 3 years due to just administration changes and volatility had already started moving very quickly into, hey, we want to earn your business. Well, that just got really accelerated in the last 8 months, right? So now it's not hard at all to get a very good manufacturer to produce 300 units of a product for you. And when I have that 300 units, I'm testing, I'm market testing. Did I get my copy, image, graphic, listing, etc. right? Because I'm going to prove before I launch that product that it is a good product. I'm going to get a sample. We're going to put it under test. We're going to make sure that it is a good product, doesn't break, meets the objectives, has a nice packaging, looks really professional, really great product, not a Me Too product. Okay. But then I'm going to go and make sure I really get the marketing. That's where I'm going to spend my 80% of time. I'm going to take 8 of the 10 hours to sharpen that axe before I take the 2 hours chopping the tree down. The 2 hours is putting it in the market and seeing if I can sell it. So we say, don't marry your products. Okay. If that 200 to 300 market test does not work out, if any testing or tweaking become too difficult and it doesn't work, we let it sell through whatever time it's going to sell through, and we move to the next product. We will always have 5 products in motion. We call it our 5x5, right? Law of averages. I put 5 test products in my brand. 1 or 2 of them will pop off organically. I'll get it right. Right time, right price, right market share, right branding, right list, copy conversion. 1 or 2 of them will naturally rise to the top. They will become the winners. And those start the hero product process in the brand. What will I do with the other ones? Well, if I can't optimize or grow them, I let them sell out, and all capital intention gets focused on the 1 or 2 that work, because any 1 or 2 product in a marketplace has what, dude? You know this. It's variations. So I can take 1 or 2 of those products and turn them into 10 or 20 SKUs. And once I know the market wants that product in that shape for me, or that color, or that size, or variation, I'm going to simply stay right there and hedgehog, like Jim Collins says in Good to Great. And I'm going to go get all the other versions of that product I can possibly come up with, even the bundles, even the different variations. And I'm just going to widen that brand out until I capture every possible version of that market for that audience intersect that has already collected data, and the algorithm has already said we're willing to sell your product faster and faster. And I simply give that seller account more and more of the same product type, and the whole thing becomes optimized. Yeah, optimization can happen really fast. Even in 10 to 50 reviews in high competition marketplaces, we've been doing $2,000 to $7,000 a day on those products right out of the gate.
Very nice.
And out of the gate, it's like within 30 to 60 days. I know that sounds right out of the gate. Let's be real. 30 to 60 days. Within 90 days, we're optimizing. And if that product shows its potential after one quarter or 90 days, then we're going to reorder and then we're going to move to a full product launch because now we have a product that has a long-term opportunity. But even then, I won't marry the product until it proves itself out because it may only last for 2 years. Okay. So I'm going to be innovating. I'm going to be constantly launching more products of innovation into my brand to find out where the next winners are. If you don't do that, you may never end up with your AirPods like Apple did, which became their number one selling product. It's not the iPhone, it's not the iMacs. The AirPods sell more than those other two combined. That is their flagship product now.
Interesting.
It wasn't their first product launch, was it?
No, it was not.
No, it was not.
So I know a lot of this stuff is in your book. You want to talk about that real quickly?
Yeah, the tactics are not there, to be clear. Tactics are something that you teach. I taught to a 19-year-old high school dropout and 76-year-old grandmas. The strategies are most important in today's world. Okay. There's a lot of tactics. There's a lot of myths out there about what you can do and can't do with brands and Amazon and all this stuff, right? If you don't have a great strategy, then you won't have an ability to pivot tactics through your strategic framework, and you will end up failing before your winner shows up, whether it's a product or service or your building or your next flex space or your next house deal or your next multi-tenant, whatever, right? We have to be flexible and we have to move. So the whole book is really the strategy. It is the 5x5 and green light strategy, from the finances to the research, with resources and video resources in there, along with support and information that are part of my podcast. So what I share and what my guests shared are very specific to our product launch playbook, and walk you through the whole strategy of building a business from the end with the end in mind, right? Businesses from the end with the end in mind are always worth more at the exit than they are during any time during the business building phase. And if we understand that, what we're understanding is while they're cash flow and they can be profitable, the book shows you that the exit is your real opportunity. And if you're paying attention to that, that's life-changing generational wealth opportunities. It really is. I've got 2 builders right now that are between 10 million and 20 million a year in sales between the two of them. And they are within 4 and 5 years of their build from the startup of that business. And when they exit that company, right, they'll never have to work again if they don't want to.
Yeah, and we didn't get a chance to talk too much about that whole concept of building with the exit in mind, but I think it's incredibly important. And I think anybody can learn about that from your book, even if they're not interested in FBA, because most of the things that my audience are into, not FBA, but you got to build your business thinking about what your exit strategy is.
You really do. That's the whole purpose, right? You're building an asset, right?
Yep.
Just like you're building a house or you're building a multi-tenant to build it up, cash flow it with the option of selling it for a profit. That's how we build these businesses, right? While we have virtual real estate, you guys have the physical buildings, we have the physical inventory. So I have a lot of real estate people, brokers, agents, otherwise, who end up working with us because they completely understand that concept. This is just another inventory. I can rent it to the market for its time being. I can replenish it as much as I want. I can change the market opportunity. There's no comparables really outside of what the brand can take on. And when I take over certain market shares, I can increase the sales of my products sometimes $5 to $10 more per unit than my competition, making even more money than they are when I overtake them. And that's a little harder to do in the real estate world with so many other conditions that focus it. But in the world of physical products, I got control of that brand.
And even if you choose not to sell, a business that's built to sell is a business that's good to run, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'll ask you a question I ask everybody towards the end of the interview. If you know exactly what you know now when you were 18, or you want to pass something on to your children when they turn 18, could be business, could be family, could be anything. What would be the advice you'd give to either yourself at 18 or your children when you have a child?
So yeah, these are great questions. So I wouldn't tell them to do what I did when I was 18 per se. I would also not say that I don't like where I ended up. So I really wouldn't go back and tell myself to do things differently. I really like where I ended up. I like who I'm married to. I love my children, and I love the life we've created in the lifestyle by design we've built over time and sweat and blood and tears and everything else. So I really wouldn't go back and say, hey, 18-year-old, do something different, right? But what I do tell my girls first and foremost is I say, follow Christ with all your heart and mind and soul, no matter what. Number one. Number two, who you marry is more like for the most important decision after that you will ever make in your entire life. As I mentioned earlier, my wife was such a rock in her willingness to let me do the risk, take the risk, trust in me, trust in God first, and then me, and have that ability to not be something that she was part of the conflict of the life and the business and things that were challenging. She was an asset. She was an ally. She was someone who backed me up. And that's extremely important. that you marry that person that will support you. That's what I tell my girls continuously. I also remind them to control the controllables, right? You can't control everything or everyone. You can't control their feelings or outcomes. You may need, again, change through yourself. You may need change through a situation to control certain things that you can, and the rest of them, just let it go. Like, let it go, right? The other aspect of it is that activity is the healer of all anxiety. If you're not moving, if you're not doing something, if you're not taking an active role in life, moving, getting up, walking, doing anything physical, anxiety will creep in, right? You'll spend too much time in front of the television or media or news or who knows what, and you will just literally veg out and you'll become depressed and you'll be thinking everybody's got a better life than you. Activity overcomes anxiety. I will always remind them that the 5 people they hang around with will define their life. The 5 people, the most critical, and just happens to be we're a family of 6. So we're all going to be hanging around each other. So that works out nicely. That is a big deal about who they hang out with. What they have to offer in terms of life is more valuable as ladies and women for their lives and their families than what they can necessarily produce in the world. I know that sounds a little bit opposite to maybe what people want to think about children, maybe women, but I see as a man who now looks through the eyes of 5 women, what the world does and the way it thinks and how it acts. And I want my women to think like women. I want them to act in the beauty and the nature of their life. So again, I have a very different perspective than maybe other fathers, listening to this with different children and whatnot. So I think about it differently. I also remind them, the last part, that there is the sunk cost fallacy. Okay. If you've already invested time, energy, if you've into something, you shouldn't just continue it, because if it's not serving you anymore, you're going to have to let it go. Right. And this is an important part of lesson in life with the change aspect. Do not be afraid to change, to lose what you've thought you might have gained or the time you might have spent or even the money doing it. If it doesn't serve you, you've got to let it go and you got to.
I resonate very heavily with a lot of those sentiments. So thank you so much for your time today, Neil. If anybody wants to reach out to you, learn more about your book or what you're doing, where's the best place for them to reach you?
Yep. I mean, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a hard charging entrepreneur who's in the space of looking for diversity or building an e-commerce platform or wanting to learn more about how that all works from beginning to end, there's a presentation. You can check out the book at voltagegm.com. That's voltagedigitalmarketing.com. Or just look me up on the web, type in Twa, can't miss me, type in Voltage, you'll find us. I got my social medias and everything out there. You will talk to me if you have any interest in working with us as an application process. I keep it very limited to who we work with. So be prepared to do what's necessary. If you're really serious and this makes sense to have a conversation, we'll talk about it.
Perfect. And I will make sure all of your contact information and links are in the show notes, as well as I believe that we have a link to your book with a code to get access to it for my listeners.
Yeah, 10 free copies for those who are listening today for the first 10. Yeah.
Perfect. So, Neil, it was a great talk with you today. Really enjoyed our time together. I appreciate you coming on. And for the rest of the Brick by Brick Nation, we will talk to you next week. Thanks for tuning in to Brick by Brick Wealth Building Conversations. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people find the show. For more tips, resources, and updates on my journey, follow me on Invest with Loren. Let's keep building wealth, one brick at a time. See you next week.